And, just to give you a bit of history about how this started, we've been having these conversations once a month since March, which is when, of course, the pandemic hit. And they started off with a conversation with our playwrights who were in residence. All of a sudden, they had to move from in-person residency to a virtual residency. So we thought it would be a great opportunity for them to have a conversation that is open to everybody to be a part of, to attend. And so that kind of became a tradition. And so we've been having these conversations once a month. The last one we had was looking at making art during the time of COVID. And so it's very, very exciting that we have Katie Christie, Aroji Otieno, and Patience Nitumasiga with us today, talking about art and social change during this time. I will let them all introduce themselves first, and then it'd be great to pass it on to all of you to just say a quick hi, tell us where you're calling from, and tell us who you are. Katie, I'll throw it on to you.
Hello, my name is Katie Christie. I'm the founder and director of an organization called Voices United. I'm really happy to be here with y'all. Let's see, Voices United is a 30-year organization that has been bringing people together from different cultures to talk about issues that are important to them and create original musical productions about those things. It also really centers focusing on developing skills and tools within the individuals that participate, so that they have an individual charge to go out into the world and also use art to make change. And it's been really exciting to see that come to fruition in many ways over the years. And it's been my pleasure to know Karishma because we worked together at Roundabout Theater a few months ago. So
feels like ages, but
feels like a minute ago.
Yes.
So that's a little bit about me.
And where are you calling in from, Katie?
I'm currently in Atlanta, but it's just because I'm here temporarily. I'm coming from Brooklyn, New York, but I'm from Miami, Florida. So there's all of that.
Yes, and we hope to have you in Africa very, very soon.
Yes, me too.
Aroji, hey. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. Thank you. Nice to see everyone here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. So yes, my name is Aroji Otieno. I'm artistic director for an organization called Bold Theatre Kenya, which is very new actually. We're just a few months old. So before that, I worked as creative and content director for a non-governmental organization called Filmate, which focuses mostly with arts in the refugee camps. So that's where I sort of like got my inspiration for the humanitarian world. It's something that I've always wanted to do, to work with in the humanitarian field. And before that, I've been working as a producer, director, teacher, and actor. So I'm sort of like the versatile fella, always exploring the arts. It's not very clear right now what to define Bold Theatre, because I'm in the process of really defining it and bringing up, bringing people together and also bringing our ideas together on what we really are working on. But at this point, what we know is we are interested in working with people from marginalized communities, the artists from marginalized communities, and that is here in Nairobi, in the refugee camps, and elsewhere within Kenya. We are also very interested in the idea of culture preservation. That is something that this conversation of authenticity and the conversation of our language, what that does to one's mind, and why are we as East Africans, especially for us as Kenyans, not able to produce work that we feel is authentic, that we feel that can stand on its own, or if we are producing it, why is it not mainstream? So, you know, those are the kind of things that we are still exploring within, you know, within Bold Theatre. But we are also very interested in the concept of intercultural collaboration, because it's interesting. We felt like with the intercultural collaboration, it makes people sort of like go deeper into their own identities and appreciate and explore other identities. So those are the few things that we've been doing, you know, at the moment with the Bold Theatre. Thank you.
Thanks, Aroji. Patience, hi.
Hi, my name is Patience Nitumwesiga. I'm currently mid-traveling. I live in Entebbe, but I've just been traveling back from Alebtong, where I'm making a documentary about rural feminists. I founded a company called Shajika, which is basically a company dedicated to telling stories of people whose stories are rarely told. We're very dedicated to decolonized African feminist stories, because we feel that a lot of stories that are out there, you know, center everybody else apart from Africans, especially African females. And so that's sort of what we want to do, but not just females, also basically just like African stories and stories that are rarely told. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll pass it on to some of folks that are part of our group today. David, you're first on my screen.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with all of you. I'm David Diamond. I'm in New York City right now, and I am the curator of the La Mama International programs, La Mama Theater in New York City, and the La Mama Umbria program in Italy every summer, which is a training program for directors and playwrights mostly, and other artists. I am here because I'm a huge fan of Karishma and Aroji, and I take any opportunity to see them that I can. And I'm interested in Theater for Social Change relative to two organizations that I'm involved with. One is Theater of the Oppressed New York City, which is involved with marginalized communities in the 5 boroughs of New York and the oppression. And if you know the Boal work, we do a lot of that TO work. And an organization called Combatants for Peace, which is an organization that is half Israeli, half Palestinian former soldiers who work together to end the occupation through nonviolence. And they're a group that is doing significant work in the Middle East. So, and I guess I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you for being here. Henry, hi.
Hi, Karishma. I'm so glad to be a part of this this meeting. I'm in Kampala right now, and I've been able to work with a few people in considering art for social change, and I fell in love with it because as a playwright, a young playwright, I would love to add on people's growth with my art. So I really love platforms like this that really help people to understand what it really means to engage in art for social change. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry.
And
yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'm here because I've been able to be one of Tebere Arts and Emerging Arts under Tebere Arts Foundation. And since joining it, I've been able to go on with its programs and following it up. So I've learned from it a lot, and I really appreciate you, Karishma, for being such a person that has really connected me to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Brenda, hi. You want to say
Karishma. Hi.
See you.
My name is Brenda Tendo. I'm an emerging artist with the Tebere Foundation. I'm here today because I've always had an interest in art for social change, but well, I haven't been navigating it on a thorough note. So yeah, I'm going to learn a lot from you guys, I guess. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Brenda. Hi, Kathy.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Kathy Perkins. I'm calling from Durham, North Carolina. I'm a lighting designer and a historian and retired professor. My interest is in plays by Black people throughout the diaspora in Africa. I've done several anthologies, primarily focusing on women. And I'm always interested in producing or publishing plays by, you know, people we just don't hear from. And so I'm working on a new collection of plays around the theme of home. It has nothing to do with COVID, but this is something I started back in 2016. So, and I'm here because Doreen Bagana, who's from Uganda, and she introduced me to Karishma and her organization. And I'm very happy to be here and to meet people throughout the continent. So that's exciting. So thank you for hosting this.
Thanks, Kathy. And just for those who don't know, Doreen was actually one of our playwrights in residence, and she was part of our first conversation. So that's how we all met. Richie, hi. Do you want to say hello?
Okay, it's agreed to unmute. Hello, I'm Richie Mwendwa. I'm a friend to Aroji, and when I saw on his Facebook page, I was like, I must attend this session. I'm a student at the University of Nairobi pursuing performing arts, and I've been involved in theater for development, participatory educational theater. I've worked in that field for about 15 years. Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Richie. Williams, Otako.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm called Otako Williams. I am the co-founder of Omuti Creative. That's an organization in Uganda. Currently right now in German, and I'm a co-founding member of Arts for Change FR, a German organization. And we work directly with Omuti Creative to use arts in Uganda for social change. I've worked with Tebere for a long time, before it was Tebere, I think, but I worked with Deborah Simon for a long time. I remember early 2019, we worked with Tebere Foundation to raise awareness and also to work with survivors of human trafficking in Uganda, using art in schools and in the communities of Buweza Wakiso district. So that's my small background with Tebere. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Identifying the expectations.
Joy?
Hi, everyone. Like you've been told, my name is Joy Abo. I'm calling in from Uganda. This is the first time I've actually heard of Tebere, so I was just curious to find out what it's all about. But in my day-to-day job, I work in a newspaper, and one of the areas in which I'm responsible for is culture and the arts. And so I thought, maybe let me just attend this to see what's happening out there beyond our borders. And that's it.
Thanks for being here, Joy. And Regan. Oh, I don't know if Regan can hear us. Okay, I don't think Regan can hear us, but if Regan, if you want to introduce yourself at a point, just let us know. Again, so happy to see you all. And I just want to give a big thank you on behalf of our two directors, Pablo and Jida, who aren't with us on the call today, but they pass all their love and hope that they can connect with you all soon. I see Asimwe is also here, so if Asimwe, you want to say a quick hi, we can get started after you've had a moment. No, it seems like Asimwe just had a baby boy, so I'm not sure if she's going to be able to say hello, but I just wanted to acknowledge that she's here, and very, very excited to see you all. So without further ado, I think we should get started. And I guess my first question for our panelists is, you've already kind of gotten into this with your introductions, but tell us more about your artistic practice and how it's been changed because of COVID, or how you're dealing with these times with work that you've been doing. Should we start with Patience?
Sure. I think for me, COVID has been both bad and good. In some ways, I've been able to stay at home and write, but in some other ways, it's been very tough because there's been no income coming in. And one of the things at Shajika that we do is to make sure, for instance, that we hire females, like the project I'm working on right now, the documentary about rural women activists. We had vowed to use only female crew, an all-female crew, and I felt bad because this time I couldn't take my female cinematographer because she had just given birth, and I couldn't afford to take a babysitter and a baby on board and all those things that come with that. So in a way, I feel restricted because there's no income, so I can't have the sort of utopian environment I want at my company to do that kind of work that we do.
Mm-hmm. How has some of the social change work that Shajika is focused on been affected? Have you found yourself interacting with more artists in the space because of COVID, or has that changed in any way?
In some ways, I actually find that it's provided an opportunity. For instance, our new project that we're launching next week, which is the podcast dedicated to African oral folktales. It's sort of like a way that came out of trying to move forward with the times. The fact that you cannot have those big fireplace meetings between families. You cannot have grandparents and grandchildren and aunties and uncles in one place. And so we're trying to sort of provide that while also acknowledging that the times have changed, and the new normal is that we might have to have some of these sessions in a digital space. And so for us to be able to have a podcast that's dedicated to that age-old tradition that's very prized on this continent is a huge opportunity for us. And it was nice having people in studio and recording some folk tales, having a few live audiences. It was really something that maybe would have overlooked if there wasn't like a pandemic like this. If we weren't under lockdown, would have always thought, we can always do it tomorrow. So I think in some of those ways, it's been like an opportunity to make some things happen now rather than wait.
Yeah, thanks for that. Aroji?
Yeah, I mean, well, COVID has definitely humbled us, but our initial project, we had noted that in most groups that I had worked with, that is in the refugee camps, in the slums around, and even just artists in general, usually the people who make these policies for them are not artists. So there was sort of like a discontinuity whereby we go outside with the artist, through street theater, through theater for development, whatever we call them, or theater of the oppressed, and we talk about issues read towards social justice or protection. But then we realized that was our burden as artists in the ground, but it was not necessarily connected to people who are making policies. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to have a conversation. We wanted these performances not only to people in the village, to people in the streets. We wanted them to the policy makers. So in a way, we were advocating for artists to become policy makers, because we felt like that was the disconnection. This is why we're talking about these things, and they are not getting implemented. So when we were about to do that, COVID humbled us. So it happened and we couldn't now meet. And of course, right now, no one is meeting. And what we did is it inspired a new idea, which was slightly similar, by the fact that we took it to Facebook. And that was just sort of like when everyone was trying to figure out what is social media, with the whole argument of if social media is also theater, you know. But we decided we have to do it because we're not doing it for definition, we're doing it because we have to. And so we came up with this project called Bold Memoir. And Bold Memoir was, and we asked people to bring in their monologues, and especially tackling matters that they were going through at that point, because the people we were supposed to bring here in Nairobi, we couldn't do it based on, you know, and the program that we're planning. So we did that, a successful season for like one season, I think about 6 weeks. And that developed into us connecting to more artists, because we invited people from now all over the world. So it was better in that way, that we're not expecting, we're only expecting people in Kenya, but we ended up doing collaboration with, you know, a team from Paraguay. That was like really great, because Paraguay has never really worked with Kenya. So this was the first time that we were getting a Spanish speaking, you know, group of artists working with us. Of course, we had other countries as well, you know, Belgium, Italy, and the others. But I was particularly interested in this connection, which I met the actor director called Paola, amazing artist, at La Mama, which is curated by David. So what this has taught me is how much we can actually get as artists. We are really connecting, and I'm really excited, you know, even when we started talking with Katie, you know, and I see a few people, it's just easier to connect with artists. And it makes us compare our challenges and also draw parallels, and also see the similarities. So I think in that there's hope after this, that we will be more exposed to what other artists are going through. I'm so happy to see that, you know, we are with Patience and Otako from Uganda, and the other people, and also the other people from the other countries. So it just makes us more exposed, and even it makes our projects richer. So after the Bold Memoir show, because I'm very interested in training artists, I approached Paola, and she did the first devising workshop with our artists. And this was the first time that we had participants from both Kenya and Paraguay being in the same class virtually. So at least we can see some positive, you know, some positive aspects of the whole situation, even though it's quite challenging.
Aroji, I've always admired your optimism, because you're really highlighting this thing of the world coming together in a way on Zoom that wouldn't have been possible. We wouldn't have really thought about if we were not presented with these circumstances. So I love your optimism, and thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't see myself as optimistic. Maybe we're just trying hard to see what's in it, but it's also very exciting to see that these are actually the new reality, as we call it. You know, some of these things. Just a brief story. You know, like in the colonial times, you know, when the colonialists came to Africa, for a long time there are a lot of myths and beliefs about who white people were. And some people, there was this common rumor that they could not die. And that was part of the challenge why they ruled us for so long. So when World War II happened and they were desperate, so they took our people, they took our fathers, and they took them to war. And those who survived came back and said, they can actually die, you know? Yeah. And so that was the beginning of this whole, and so that is how I look at it. You know, it's a grave time, it's a grave moment, but we are also getting into those aha moments and really understanding how, you know, theater or the world, the system really works. And I think that's a plus for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Katie, I just wanted to pass it on to you to share a little bit about how it's like for your practice and how it is in the US right now.
I mean, I think that what's been interesting for us is, like, you know, after so many years, the people that we work with in the US have spread out all over the place and are working all over the place. And the different exchange work and programs that we've done in different countries, it's been feeling more and more like we have people all over that we want to connect with. And I've been striving to figure out, like, how can we do that? like using all this digital stuff. And this was a while back. And I went down like this actually kind of expensive path that never really yielded what I was looking for, which is a funny thing because now this moment has pushed technology into a way that it's making it way more possible. There's still a lot of things artistically that I'd like Zoom to be better at, but, you know, or we need, you know, better technology that's still more accessible, that's, you know, and better real time for sound and things like that. But for the most part, what I found as a very small organization is that one thing in the US is, you know, there are a handful, you know, there are some organizations that consume the majority of the funds. And so then if you're a smaller, like more community-based or grassroots organization, you're really, the idea of space is huge obstacle, you know, it becomes half of your budget to figure out where am I going to produce this, how much, you know, and all of that. And so even rehearsal space, right? That's many of the places, arts institutions that have space are not generous with it, you know. So this has been sort of like a nice thing because all of a sudden there's an equity in space and our organization isn't at any sort of disadvantage for not being able to pay for a big, you know, space to produce something. It's also just been great in being able to reconnect with all of the different people that we've always worked with and like re-spark that sort of energy of change amongst themselves. And it's enabled us to be even more agile in responding to the work that our folks are doing and the needs that they have. So, you know, it's not making us any money, that's okay. But it's definitely feels a bit more like we can accomplish a lot more with a lot less obstacles because there's some sort of like equal playing field on the internet. The internet doesn't know like how many properties I own or how many seats are in my theater.
You know, it's really interesting you say that. And I wonder, you know, it's actually I have another follow-up question, which is kind of the next question I want to ask, which is kind of based on this idea of equity and how that kind of plays into the kind of art we're speaking about today, which is social justice-based, which is social change-based. And, you know, what you've just said about the equity in the space, I'm sure, you know, exists globally because we're able to connect like this. But there's also this moment of, well, what happens in a context like Africa where data is so expensive to pay for, right? So inherently there's another space where the internet becomes another question of, well, what kind of work are we producing and what does this mean on the global scale? But I guess my question is, how has this world sort of shifted our understanding of, or shifted your understanding of the idea of art and social justice? Do you see them as separate? Do you see them as art making being a vehicle for social change? What are your understandings of that now? What were they and what are they now?
I think that, you know, for me, that's not something that changed. I think like, you know, for me, I was trained as like, you know, in the traditional theater trainings of the United States. And the first time, I mean, for me, that idea of theater really didn't resonate with me, and I stayed involved with it because I enjoyed it, but I didn't ever like feel like any of the content meant anything. And so I started making, you know, writing my own things that were responding to the things that I was experiencing, like, you know, drug abuse amongst my peers in the 80s. And so for me, I don't understand what theater is if it's not deeply connected to social justice. If we're not utilizing ourselves as artists to make change in the world, I mean, yes, I believe that the arts should entertain and should do all of these things, but that should be the byproduct of that. There is an intention that is going to move us forward as a peoples. And so that hasn't changed for me. it's allowed for me to be more, I think, a little bit more effective in that way. You know, I think that there are more, this moment has brought more things to bubbling up to the surface. So there's more opportunity, more and more opportunity. Like I'm running out of time in my schedule to meet the needs of all of the social justice work that like is popping up in response to the needs of like people realizing that they're existing in horribly racist situations, you know, in the United States, and what can we do about that? And so I think it's just amped up my understanding of that we need to use art to make change, and we need to be like intentional and full of like all of our energies and fire for that, you know, like we can worry about entertaining ourselves later. We got work to do on this planet.
Thanks, Katie. What about you, Patience? What do you think?
I actually find that term very problematic every time people say art and social change or art and social justice, because oftentimes I find that people think that art is a tool for them to just like pass on their agenda. And I actually think that art in its own right is revolutionary, and it shouldn't be seen as just like a tool and used as bad art to pass on some messages. And I've been part of so many projects that are sort of like that. And the problem I've always had is when people want you to make bad art because they want to say, what's important is the message, but we are human beings. You have to appeal to humans' cognitive abilities, but also to their emotions. And I think that the beauty of art is that, you know, it gives you a chance to like explore all that without necessarily being like too preachy, if I can use that word. And that's why for me, you know, for a long time, there are people who've talked about the fact that you cannot be neutral. There is no art that's just neutral. Either you stand for the status quo or you are, you know, standing for somebody else that's being oppressed or something. And if you say that the story about the white man coming to Africa to save us is a neutral story, obviously you have a problem. So, and that's why I, you know, like at Tragika, we really try to like tell stories that show some of these, you know, inequalities that we take as sort of being normal or neutral. Like if you say the normal story, if you want to say you're neutral and listening to men, that definitely means you are not neutral. You are siding with the status quo. And so to deliberately, I think for me, it's a matter of being deliberate and saying, I want women here. I want rural women here. I want uneducated women listened to. I want this story. I want to talk about the, for instance, one of the short films I'm working on is the story of, or saying something about it, or even police was giving like weird excuses, and people say like, you know, yeah, and social justice and stuff. Yes, it is about that, but it has to be a beautiful story. And people don't just listen to bad art just because there's a message. And, you know, one of the reasons we actually created this podcast was because people always think that good stories have to come from the West. And we were sort of trying to counter that and say, our people know the art of storytelling. You don't have to follow the Hollywood structure to tell a good story. And some of the stories we actually got, like we already recorded some stories and we were very shocked by how they're very women-centered. They have a lot of entertainment. They have very big ambitions, and they're, you know, they offer a lot of things, nature, how to relate with nature, a lot of wisdom. But at the same time, they're not just like blunt. They're not bad, you know, this. And here, especially in Uganda, we have a lot of that, a lot of organizations putting money into message art, and they call it, you know, social change art. And I have a big problem with that, because it's like bad and it gives you a bad rap, or you want to take art to the community and you're taking them substandard art and telling them, because it's about something you care about. I totally don't believe that. I believe, you know, village people, for instance, one of the things or reasons we created Shajika, and one of our values is to take quality art to all audiences. People fill up the National Theatre and watch good stuff, and then you want to take a bad play to my village and tell them they should listen just because you're telling them about education or something. So I could go on, I don't want to talk too long, but I strongly believe in having beautiful art that also talks about, you know, utopic ideas and talks about revolutionary ideas.
Yeah, it's really profound what you said, because from what I understand, what you're suggesting is that one must focus, or at least we in our African context should focus on making good art and being deliberate about the people we're incorporating in the process, and that the social justice element will inherently follow with that. Does that feel?
It's a bit of that, but also trying to say, like, we cannot look at art as just a tool. And I've worked with a lot of activists, and I took one of my films to the University of York. They have a beautiful center of applied human rights. And there was this discussion about artivists or artistic activists, so creative activists or something. And the thing is, like, the problem with that is that sometimes we try to do each other's job. We want to be activists, we want to be artists, and sometimes some people are really good at it, but some people suck at one of them. And so I think for me, my ideal would be, can we collaborate with the people who are good at one? If you have a project that's really advancing some agenda that you really care about, work with people like that. I like working with activists because I'm not a good activist. You know, they have things we want to achieve. They think in terms of, you know, how are we going to do this? But I'm more into reflection. If I write something and I want people to reflect, it doesn't necessarily mean they will take action, but the activist wants to see action being done. And I totally agree. But if I'm unable to do that, people who are able to, after, you know, reflecting on the art, what's going to happen? What is the community going to do about, you know, the things they've reflected about? And in that sense, that's why I believe collaboration helps.
Yeah, I mean, I want to throw this to Aroji, because I think I'd love to hear your thoughts, Aroji, based on what Patience has just shared, given your background in artivism and activism, and also your practice as an artist. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I'm somewhat guilty of that, but I've also I really agree with Patience. We had I think over the last, I remember actually when this we call it here TFD, you know, Theatre for Development, when it was being introduced in East Africa, and I remember how it actually destroyed the mainstream theatre, because what happened, and what always happens, is the other side always has the funding. So we had, you know, really good thespians who were developing and coming up, and they went to do theatre on the other side. And you could see that art and you would cry, you know, so I know what it means. You'd watch it and you'd cry. It would be like, this is the verse, I want you to go and talk about AIDS, say AIDS is bad, you're gonna get killed, and that's what the actor says on stage, you know, no creative expression whatsoever. And so I feel that most of it is actually about the how. The tool is actually there, you know, from, of course, Agostino Boal and many others who've, you know, written wonderful stuff and had great experiences about how we can use this stuff. But and I was discussing with, I think actually with David, how we get tools. Sometimes we get, instead of getting tools in East Africa, we get, we emulate. So if someone comes up with an idea, instead of looking at what we do have as artists, what is within ourselves, and then looking at the tool and seeing if that tool can help us or not, we just take it as it is. And that is what has happened to Kenya. If you see the idea of our dances, you know, how contemporary dance was introduced, how Theatre for Development was introduced, how Theatre for Oppression was introduced. It is something we're just taking without asking any questions, and then we're using it. But then what is happening now, and what I'm hearing, is people experience, you know, some of these things that when we talk about, we ourselves experience them, and we also have our own styles and our own forms that we want to explore. So whatever else that we are adding out there, it is as a matter of a skill that can help us develop what we already have. So we're not really exchanging something else for what we have. And it is something that has actually really, we need to be very, very careful about it, because oftentimes, even the message that we take to the people, we end up not taking the right message, and we end up scaring these people. I remember there's a time about some time back, you know, maybe 8-9 years ago, when we had funding for bird flu. That was actually, for us, was good free funding because it wasn't here yet. So we were told you can just use this in case it's here. And we thought, yeah, we didn't have money, so why not? But we took time to really, we enjoyed ourselves because we developed a really interesting play, and we were more concerned about the story. So when we took it all over, you know, we were traveling with it all over, we had this, we realized that it took us about 20 to 30 minutes before people came. And then when people came, all of a sudden we had like 1,000 people surrounding us, 2,000 people surrounding us. And at some point I asked people, how come you came late? And they said, oh, we thought it was those things of AIDS you usually tell us. So the kind of image we're giving about, you know, theater for development or theater for social justice, we need to be very careful, because if that is the image we put across, then people will, you know, call it, that is theater, you know, just the way people call bad theater is now defined as theater, whereas it's some melodramatic stuff. I just want to point out, going back again to your question, Karishma, is that for now in Kenya, it's interesting because what we need to talk about, everybody knows what we need to talk about, but it is not easy to talk about it. You know, so what we have right now is, even before this, was probably entertaining theater. And it's not bad, but it's just to beat about the bush, because the problem is poor governance. You know, that is the elephant in the room. There's nothing else. Everything else you try to do, every issue that you try to point out, it brings you back to poor governance. Now we are in a very technocratic government, very close to dictatorship. This is the reality. You know, you don't know what, you know, I sometimes make a Facebook status on my Facebook, and I get an inbox threatening, or on WhatsApp, you know, someone threatening and text you. So you know you're in this and people are afraid, and people are thinking more of how to commercialize the work. So even commercial theater is the opposite side of theater for development, whereby we're still not talking about what we really want to talk about. And I think it's you know, it's at the end of the day, it goes to the human condition. When we tackle the human condition, then these issues that we are going through are going to come out. And so we probably are now having interesting writers coming up with more creative ways of, you know, tackling issues. But then I think going back to the 70s and 80s, the days of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, it feels like we might go back to those places, because now people are agitated and people need to write their theater. But the theater is about the oppression. We just had a bill in Parliament that was thrown away, luckily. I think it was the day before yesterday, when they're proposing to take money from poor counties. Counties are like the provinces we have here, or the states. So they're proposing to take money from those poor counties and add them to rich counties. The common sense in that, the person who even thinks about that as a bill, I still do not understand, you know. And this is the kind of, you know, but this is the kind of bills that have been passed, you know, in Parliament on, and these bills are affecting us directly. So I think we're at a very, for us in Kenya, I think we're at a very troubling time, and we don't really have a clear way forward.
I think one thing that's interesting that I've seen change over time, like in this work, or just in the world of theater, is how often the terms change. And so I think it's important to remember to do the work you do it with all of your heart and integrity, and striving for the best work you can create. And don't, you know, like, yes, they called it this 30 years ago, and then 20 years later it was this thing, and then that, and you know, now people are talking about social justice, and that's really just in the funding platform. Like, we know what we're doing. They can call it whatever they want, and I think it's important for us not to try to like bend ourselves into the terms of the moment. Just do the work that we do, and then yes, I mean, I can take what I've been doing and apply it to this terminology or to that terminology and to the terminology that's also coming in the future, because it stands as true regardless of what the terminology is to talk about it.
Right, and it'll always stay relevant in some way, shape, or form, because there will be a space for it in whichever world and whichever context. I mean, just building off of that, I'd be curious to hear how, with your respective, the work that you do with Voices United, Katie, the work that with Shajika Patience and Bold Theatre, Aroji, how do you imagine that work shifting over time, given the world we're living in, with movements like Black Lives Matter, with LGBTQI activism on the rise? How do you imagine your work shifting and changing based on that? Patience, do you want? Oh, Aroji, go ahead. You're on mute, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't know who was going.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, shifting is sort of like, is usually a scary word, because you hope that what you visualize is, is what you see. I think for me, what has been consistent over the years is training. I think the fact that we do not have an acting school in Kenya, I do not know if we now have one in Uganda, but the fact that we do not have, a drama school, where people can actually have just basic knowledge on how to go about it. It's not about impacting, forcing someone to believe in something, but it's about, if someone has been introduced to the theater at 19 years, and they expect to be here until 80 years, where do they go? My experience was, it took me months and years. It actually took me 4 years before I joined amateur theater, just because I didn't know where to go, And at the moment someone told me that there was a place called the National Theater, I always went there to just look at the posters until one day I found an audition. And I think, unfortunately, that is still the process. It's only that now it's online. Most people are lost. Most people do not know the structure. And even once they're there, most people do not know how to act, how to behave, who to go to when they need help and support. And so I still feel that there's need for us to really create a strong foundation, so that the people who come out and make, several decisions, and even these definitions, I agree that you should be free from them. But I think it's easier for you to be free from them once you understand them. Once you understand, what are these things people are talking about? What are these? What is trouser plays, and all these kind of things that's happening in the theaters. What are the different stages of kind of theater within your community, so that you can know what you're interested in. Otherwise, we are finding people who are stuck in one thing just because they do not realize, what else is there around them. The idea for also where the work with social justice is going, or theater for community or the society. I think there should be, the challenge we're having, and I do not have a solution, is that it is so funding dependent. And I do not have a solution, but I just know it's a scary time, and I think, the coronavirus proves that we need to think about something else, that can, maybe if it's smaller and, people just go maybe to the buses and do something, or people just go outside, I enjoy the days when you just go to the street and do some street theater and, and make people, get it, or get something, but, it's not sustainable. So I guess the conversation of also how art, can be more sustainable is a reality, and yes, it is, maybe that is the word commercialized, but we need to find a word, we need to make people understand that this is what we do. So this is not only a source of livelihood, but this is a way of life. How do we connect those two, so that someone who's an actor, because right now, as you see in Kenya, we have a very high turnover. you see a lot of actors in their 20s, and then when they start getting into their 30s, it's almost like reality hits. You know, sometimes I wish, like, if you see our stage, we do not have, even people in their 40s, it is rare to see someone in their 40s on stage, you know? And for me, sometimes I just wish we could see a stage where you do not have to paint white, you know, hair for you to act as a, you know, as a, you know, we should see everybody on stage. So, and we're not talking about people being rich. We're just talking about how can that be sustainable? How can we make a more sustainable structure to allow this to be continuous? So I think for me, that's how I would see, you know, Bold Theatre really looking at being part of the policy making and trying to support those solutions that people have, so we can have a stronger, you know, a stronger platform.
Thank you. Patience?
I'm actually very, very hopeful because I think everything is always evolving, and I think our world is evolving, our way of making art is evolving. And especially in terms of content creation, I'm really hopeful that people are gonna launch new innovative ways. I'm very obsessed with Octavia Butler and her Afrofuturist work. And I think we're heading there. I think, you know, I'm not scared of the future, and if it goes in a dystopian direction, because I think humans are always evolving. And one of the quotes that I love very much from Octavia Butler is, "There's nothing new under the sun, but there's many new suns, or many more suns." And I think that artists are, you know, on that journey of discovering new suns, on that journey of discovering alternatives. You know, it's good to know how things were done, but I like how, you know, we're doing things in new ways. If we cannot meet together and have a fireplace conversation, yeah, well, we'll have a podcast about that. If we cannot meet, you know, at a theater, and, you know, we'll find ways. So I'm really, really hopeful, and I hope that we will create more utopian content, because I believe sometimes, you know, the reality, like Otieno was saying, sometimes when you get lost in the reality, you forget to dream. And I think what art offers us is a chance to dream and see where else we can go, where else we can transport ourselves. And, you know, I hope there's going to be more Octavia Butlers, especially on the continent, thinking of alternatives, but also thinking about, you know, moving with the changing times. I personally do like romanticizing the past, but I also acknowledge that things change, and sometimes it's a good thing.
So profound, so profound. I'm going to keep that Octavia Butler quote with me. Thank you, Patience. Katie.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the future is full of a lot of innovation. I'm interested in hopefully seeing innovation that frees us all from the colonized ideas of excellence, and those ideas of what is art, or what is theater, or what is training. I'm interested in, and really hopeful in, all of us sort of discovering new and innovative ways to connect with the authentic ways Black and Brown people always told stories, rather than trying to like find sustainable ways to fit into the like Western construct of really like what was stolen from us and turned into Western theater. So I'm excited about this idea that like we can celebrate all the talents that we have, and how we learned this art, and like keep moving that forward and investigate and know like where this is coming from ancestrally, and find like what is the bridge between those things, that it's something new that maybe even connects us as humans in a deeper way than like this way we've been engaging with theater in the past 50 years has maybe. So I'm excited. I'm also excited about, I think part of what I see is that there's going to be more theater that is spanning the continents. I mean, that's not something that hasn't been happening for, 30 years or so, more than that. But I feel like there's more and more people are going to see the value in that, and that there's going to be more energy and support put behind that. And I'm hopeful, because I think that that's going to make all of us richer as artists and as human beings.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. And it really goes back to what Aroji was saying about the sort of intercontinental space for us to really imagine and dream and be who we are, in the sense of the word. I have so many more questions, but I'm also conscious of time. And I know that we have, our audience may have some questions for you. So I want to take this opportunity to encourage everybody to turn their videos on, to turn your mic on if you're not in a noisy place. And let's open up the floor for conversation. If there's any questions that you all have for our panelists, please feel free to take the space. I encourage you to keep your mics on so we can really have a back and forth discussion.
Hi, this is Kathy. Can I ask a few? Well, it's more comments. First of all, thank you all. This was very, well, with Aroji, I did not know that there was not an acting program in Kenya. This is very new for me. And as you all talked about theater for development, social issue theater, I couldn't help but think about Rose Mbowe throughout the whole time. And most of y'all are probably too young. Y'all will look at me like, who is she? She died 21 years ago. Are you familiar with Rose Mbowe?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I recently translated a play that she performed before she passed. So.
Was it Mother Uganda?
It was the Mother Uganda and her children. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I couldn't help but think about her being such a pioneer, and how this woman literally died, trying to, promote what she was doing, and all the people that she inspired, like a Hope Azita. Some of you all may know her and Rwanda and stuff. So the other thing I was wondering about was the EATA, it's East African Theater. I don't remember what the I stands for. Does that exist? I mean, the last festival I went to was like in 2008. This is Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and I forgot the fourth country, Uganda. They would get together every year. It would rotate in each country. So that doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. I think Richie is there. Richie, would you know more about it?
Yeah, it was like sponsored by the International Theatre Institute. It's no longer there. Yeah, we got corrupt.
That's too bad, because it was such a wonderful event. You have all
it was wonderful. It was one of them. It was a very successful program. Unfortunately, our Kenyanness caught up.
So has there been a substitute or something that has filled in that organization, or for groups to get together? I mean, I don't know, is there anything where the countries can get together, like,
Well, there is I don't know, maybe Richie can help me with this. We have a Tyrial network, which is supposed to be even much bigger than IATA. Because a Tyrial network is based in South Africa, and it's supposed to have branches everywhere. It became very political. So I have personally never really sort of like been able to sort of like benefit from it. But I know that it was sort of more concerned with policy making and strategy, and then supporting the networks that exist within the country. I think it might be still existing. It's just not as active as it's supposed to be. And maybe the bigger question is, do we need, in fact, I was just actually talking about that earlier. We've always had these umbrellas coming in. It will be interesting to see where, at what point they go wrong or they do not happen. And if you're interested, Kathy, I might even send you a few organizations that I think have led. We've had the Go Down Arts here that has actually been, it has been supported by the Ford Foundation for a long time. and they have been the ones who've really worked in the idea of bringing people together and trying to have these sort of workshops. We've also had HIVOS, H-E-V-O, I think, no, H-I-V-O, but I don't really know what they do nowadays. So I'll still find out what's happening, and maybe I can send some of that to you. It's just not as felt as IATA. I think IATA was very effective.
The ITI presence sort of exists latently still in Uganda through some core members like Professor Kawa, who was formerly at Makerere. But yeah, just as Aroji said, the sort of convening spaces are no longer active in the same way. I think the same applies, and I think Patience can speak more to this in the Ugandan context of in the past there were these sort of network spaces, but they've kind of disintegrated. And it's more so the festivals, I think, in the region. Personally, I feel like it's the festivals like Hope's Ubuntu and the Umuninya festival in Burundi that are sort of saving that space where it really, and KITF, of course, that become these convening spaces for artists in the region.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, for a long time, actually, when there was like no theater festival in Uganda, it was bad until KITF came up, and suddenly there's more like Ethiopian playwrights coming over here and producing their projects and more collaboration across the continent. But of course, with the new UCC regulations now, we're even more threatened, where to create content, to exhibit, to even show a play, like all these permits that suddenly we're supposed to pay for. So I think it's getting tough politically, but yeah, hopefully we'll overcome.
Hi, David. I see you may have raised your hand there. Did you want to? Feel free to jump in.
This has been so interesting and educational. I resonate with what everybody has been saying. And I had a few thoughts that I'd like to share. And in the context of just trying to get a better understanding. I was totally in accordance with what Katie was just saying. And I think that theater and art is a mechanism of self-expression first, and then it relates to the bigger audience and community after. So I think that the mere fact of being a creatively expressive person and sharing that creativity with other people may inspire their own creativity. And that's where I think change can really happen, is as the person understands how they can be more self-expressive through art. And that's why I'm kind of back and forth about this idea of good art versus bad art, because it's obviously a subjective idea, and sometimes the bad art, if you want to call it that I've seen, has had a significant impact on people who haven't been experiencing art at all, and understanding that there's a way that they can express themselves, even if they're not so good at it yet. But I also believe in rigorous practice and becoming the most, the best artist that you can be, because I think that you're more likely to be able to reach people through doing the finest work possible. It has a different kind of impact. And the other thing I was thinking about was something that Aroji was saying about doing the art to teach you something about some specific societal issue that's going on. And the way that can seem, sort of agitprop, like it's like about to encourage you to do something very specific politically or whatever. But I think the value of art can be in the metaphor, so that we're not always like hammering away at this is a specific thing that I want you to do, and I'm sharing this story so you'll make a change. But think about it in terms of visual art as well. When I respond to some piece of visual art, it's not because it's actually telling me to do something specific, but it's changing the way I perceive things. And I think the beginning of change is expanding our perception, and I think it could be a really personal thing. So I just jumbled all that together to put out what you guys have inspired me to think about. So thank you.
Thanks, David. Really stuck the idea of the beginning of change is expanding perception.
I think maybe if I can say something about the good art, bad art idea is that it's a very colonial concept in my experience, at least, where, you know, like people come here, especially white people, and want to create a project to teach Africans something. And then they say, well, you cannot create it too cryptic, you cannot make it too artistic, because they won't understand. And it's very problematic because they want to dumb down everything just so you can say what they want to say. And I think that's the context of the bad art, good art we were talking about. And like Otieno was saying, you know, there's funding behind it. So obviously somebody's going to do it. But in the end, it kills the whole creative expression, because every expression you want to create, then it's deemed to be too artistic, that people won't understand it, because the message is seen as the superior thing in this space. Whereas if it was left to the artist to actually express themselves, I think that would be a good thing, if an artist could just express themselves and inspire other people. But in this case, where there's like some money from Netherlands telling you, you have to say that AIDS is bad, and if they do not hear it, then there's a problem, and you have to specifically say that, you know, like, it kills the whole creativity and assumes that African people aren't used to creative expressions, or that they only understand certain messages if they're said a certain way. So I think for me personally, that's what I have a problem with, when you assume that these people will not perceive the art unless it's like completely done in a specific way. And if it's coming from a foreign perspective, and assuming that just because people are Ugandan, for instance, they won't understand art.
Thank you for that. I think that I totally agree. I think that's what Aroji or what somebody was saying about stories that we haven't heard before, like not being allowed to be expressed. And I want to hear all the, you know, the stories from people in places that I am not familiar with. That's what La Mama is all about. But I take your point. It's somebody else's idea of what you should be doing, as opposed to letting it come from your own cultural background.
Yeah, totally. And if I may also just add to what both of you are saying, you know, like I've actually brought American friends in Kenya to watch a play, and you could see it in their eyes saying, yeah, that's bad art. You know, it's just within the context. And, you know, like how David, you've said it, and going back to Patient's point is a clear example. You know, when we joined theater, we were taught a way of performing in theater. And you have these rules. And, you know, like, because I started as a street artist, no one taught me anything. So I had to accept that, yeah, this is now professional theater. And we were told things like, you cannot mask, you cannot show your back, you cannot, you know, there was a particular way you had to stand on stage. I'm just giving a specific example. And so if that is taken and given to your body, which does not know how to walk 2 steps, turn left, you know, and, you know, it's very specific, very robotic. You end up, when you see that on stage, it actually becomes comical. You know, there's also a very, the history of melodrama. We had like, there was this idea of melodramatic performances that started within the colonial time. And, you know, it came from also the Shakespearean sort of like delivery. And this idea of choral, you know, choral verse, where 4 people spoke at the same time. So from choral verse, where people are speaking, 4 people are speaking at the same time, and there's a bit of hesitation and a bit of melody to follow that. We had that taken, and that became the way you must speak on stage. And our students, our school students, even up to date, if they do not speak in a melodramatic manner, they cannot win the national theater, the only national theater competition that they have, which is also based in competition, which is another challenge. So you can see that the reason why you have to compare it in that way is that it's because people are pushed completely to do some things that they do not know or they do not understand. And I also remember my own experience working on scripts that I could not connect to. I could not connect to being in a British place, in a street in London where I've never even been, trying to feel the weather, having very specific jokes that even after 10 years, even if you explain that joke to me, it will never make me laugh. So what happens? You have to find that laughter. And of course, that laughter becomes very unreal. So these are some of the things that have been, like when you look at it, and still a lot of the population still believes that is theater. It is important for us to, discuss it and find ways to unlearn. So it's not really, it's not really a free space. And even these schools that I was talking about, these are actually schools to help people unlearn, to free people up, to say, hey, it comes from within. And, yeah, so I see Katie raising a point, raising the hand, so yeah. But yeah, so basically that's, in a nutshell, that's what I mean. How do we unlearn these structures? How do we also develop our own structures? How do we get inspirations like from Octavia, and see that these are the new sons? I like that expression. How do we get, and let me just point this out. Now Kenya, the new sort of like the awakened Kenyans are now being inspired by America, which is for me still very, very dangerous, because the same way our fathers were inspired by Britain and the colonial theater sort of took everything and we had that definition. If we are not careful again, we will be obsessed again by the American culture and again bring it in, and then we leave another burden for 10, 15 years that the next generation also has to deal with because everything has been Americanized. So I think the issue is, how do we really drill into who we really are and be comfortable with who we really are, our human conditions, and really then see what is the support system that can be able to hold that and help us explore art in a way that we deeply understand.
Thanks, Aroji. I think William, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to react on something about like when one of the members were sharing about how it feels like when artists from the global north come to the global south, and it is felt that, oh, you need to do this because that's what the donor, or that's what the founder, or that's what the artist wants. First and foremost, art is really impacted by the issue of the new colonial system of economic wave, like the global north takes control and it is felt in exchange. Currently, I work with theater here in Germany. I do a production both international, also within Germany. Recently, we had a collaboration with 8 countries coming together in France, and we supposed to use art for change, using art, talking about the issues that social injustice, the globalization, and all that. But we need to create something, and we are having countries where there's a global north countries and the global south countries. You feel you need to understand how this can work, and we have directors from the global south. That's how important it happens. And we also have directors from the global north. That's why you feel the pressure. What is art? What should we show to the people? But how we work, definitely most times, is that we depend on where are we working. If our audience is the people from the global south, then we need to value how they define art. In my mind, I don't know what is good art and bad art, but in my mind, anything that someone sits and thinks and creates is good. And if you don't accept that, then that's you have not understood that person. So when I have this kind of open mind, then it's very easy for me to operate and react and work with artists from global north and the global south. That's how it works on my side. But however, at the general artistic level, when you're an artist from the global south, it's going to be difficult for you to prove the point to the artists from the global north. It is economically and politically deep down into the system. You cannot compete. As much as you say, I'm going to create this for the audience in Europe, you have to think hard they might understand the story. One, you're doing art in Europe, but they're expecting stories that they have heard from the news, stories they are seeing on the screen. They are not open to stories that you understand what the Global South is. That's why you find that you have funding that are pushing you to talk about HIV, talk about Ebola, talk about children dying of hunger. No, they're not pushing you to talk about the innovation, talk about the great writers, the great artists. We have great writers in the Global South that have good books. You cannot find them being talked about here, but you will find books talking about issues of Africa being still scrambling. But it's us artists to change this, to change the picture. And we can tell the donors, this is not what we can, this is not what people want. If you're talking about entertainment, if you're talking about, for me, how I define art and change is to empower someone to decide, speak and do something for themselves, but not to tell them to do what I want them to do. That's how I defined it. Thank you.
Thank you. In our last 5 minutes, I'm just wondering if there's anybody else who hasn't spoken, who wants to share their thoughts. Great. Well, this feels like a good moment for us to wrap up. I just want to take this opportunity to thank our three panelists very, very much for being here and for really sparking a critical, exciting, thought-provoking conversation. I'm sure that there will be more opportunities for us to continue engaging, but so grateful on behalf of the entire Tebere team that you were able to be with us and share the space with us today. And thank you so much to all those that attended, for all your thoughts and for being so, for participating in the discussion with us and for asking great questions and really being part of this community. So thank you so much. I'm going to really quickly share my screen just in case you don't already follow us on social media. Here are our handles. Please feel free to follow us and reach out whenever you'd like to. It would be great to talk and connect. And yes, David, great question about the recording. Yes, the recording of the session will be available. We will upload it onto our YouTube channel as soon as we have that processed. So yeah. Thank you all so much. And on behalf of Asimwe, Pablo, and Jida as well, just want to thank you all.
Thank you.
Katie, Aroji, Patience, any last words?
I think for me, my last words would be that, I'm inspired by change. I'm inspired by the changing times, and I think as artists we ought not to be scared by things that are different or things that change, while also trying to preserve who we are as Africans, because I think in the global space, the African points of view is sort of always seen as, from colonial times, as the unimportant points of view. And so I hope we can all be authentic, like Aroji was saying, to who we are and what we know. And our art is not inferior to the of the West. Our art is to make sure that art is seen, that African point of view, and I hope more African artists will join in, because it is a collaborative venture. Thank you.
Thank you, Patience. All right, everyone. Go ahead, Reggie.
Yeah, I'll go. So first of all, thank you very much, Karishma, for making this possible, and thank you also for allowing me to meet fellow practitioners. You never know when you meet people and what can happen in the future. I also just want to point out that we have have to believe in ourselves as African artists. You know, that is where it starts. We have to believe. It might take longer, it might be a bit more difficult, but we have to believe in that work. And that means that we have to support each other, because if we do not support each other, if someone writes and no one reads the script, first of all, I just want to say I'm available. I love reading people's scripts, so please send it, you know. So we have to do that. We have to be the ones who enjoy the work. And then the other thing is, for those who are not Africans and are here, you know, thank you for, you know, being interested in our work. You know, and we hope that you'll encourage even people out there to be interested in our work. And, you know, something that has been pointed out is we desire to produce our work the way it is, to present it the way it is, without the worry of how friendly it is to, you know, an outside audience and all that. Of course, there's also the reality of the structure and all that. So we are really happy that you're here. Kathy Perkins, I got it that you love scripts. I have one. I'm sure other people also have scripts that are around here. So it will be great if we have that conversation about what can we do with our plays and how interesting, you know, can we be able to make them. Thank you, Katie Chrissy, for sharing this panel with me. Thank you, Patience, for sharing this panel with me. And I really look forward to, you know, knowing you guys and your work more in the future. Thank you.
So, Karishma, can you make sure we get emails so we can I get the emails of the people who were here today? So that would be great. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can do that. Katie, did you want to say anything, or are we good? Okay, great. Thank you all so much. Again, reach out to me via email if you'd like to connect with any of our panelists, if you'd like their email and whatnot, and we can make that happen.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.